doesn't take a genius to see what they're doing as long as you look for it, as long as you don't get your news from the mainstream media. And what they're doing to us right now is pushing us one step closer to World War III. Welcome to Redacted. I'm Clayton Morris. We cover the stories the mainstream media ignores here. And guess what? We are closing in on 1 million subscribers. So please, please hit that subscribe button. I thank you tremendously as we expose these corrupt politicians and the billionaire cabal that is ruining our lives. This is the traveling edition of Redacted as we are on location. And look, I read all of your comments on our videos. And one thing you overwhelmingly tell me regularly on this channel is, Clayton, it's the cabal. They are running everything. Yes, they are. So let's talk about what the cabal is doing today. And let's talk about World War III. Well, the mainstream media actually didn't ignore this story, but they certainly glorified it. They fawned over it. NATO expanding its forces to 300,000 soldiers and setting them to high alert. Just watch how NBC News described this situation.
Tonight, responding to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, involving more than 100,000 Russian troops, NATO is set to put a force of 300,000 on high alert.
So, high alert for a showdown with Russia. That's great. This media loves this because it makes them a ton of money. Remember, CNN's ratings were absolutely in the toilet back in January of this year. All it took was a war with Ukraine. More money for them when there's a war. So a showdown with Russia, the way the media frames it, it almost makes it sound like it's fun, like it's Gary Cooper in High Noon, you know, showing up for a little bit of a fun gun battle.
I'm not trying to be a hero. If you think I like this, you're crazy.
But guess what? That's not how this ends. This ends with a world war. President Biden recently warned us what that would look like.
The idea that we're going to send in offensive equipment and have planes and tanks and trains going in with American pilots and American crews, just understand, and don't kid yourself, no matter what you all say, that's called World War III.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, for that sobering reminder of what a war with Russia would look like, total destruction. But they don't care. This is what they've been working their whole lives for, right? Even President Biden, a short time after his World War III speech, said he wants regime change in Russia. Putin gone.
A dictator bent on rebuilding an empire will never erase a people's love for liberty. For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power.
Well, President Biden is about to get his wish come true because something big happened this weekend that underscores that. NATO has a new commander. The ceremony happened this weekend, and Commander Christopher Cavoli is the new NATO commander-in-chief in Europe. It was a big ceremony with flags and music and food and dancing and celebration. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin flew in to Germany to do the honors. He'll be stationed in Stuttgart, Germany. That's where the head of this operation is. And General Mark Milley describes Christopher Cavoli as being built basically from like a Russian test tube for this mission to fight Russia. He's basically saying this guy was like custom built for this job. Watch.
Chris knows Europe better than any living officer in uniform today. Chris Cavoli is the right officer in the right job at the right time. You are upholding the rules-based international order. You are keeping NATO solid and together.
So this new NATO commander takes charge of his new 300,000 strong troops, funded primarily from the United States tax dollars, to fight a proxy war against Russia. His boss is NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, who said the quiet part out loud. He revealed to reporters just the other day that NATO's push into Eastern Europe since 2014 was done specifically with Russia in mind. Well, of course it was. Does anyone think differently? The CIA, MI6 have been operating in Ukraine since 2014 after we installed a puppet government there, a puppet regime. This was all part of the plan, guys. The head of NATO said this, quote, "The reality is also that we've been preparing for this since 2014. That is the reason we have increased our presence in the eastern part of the alliance, why NATO allies have started to invest more in defense, and why we have increased our readiness." Yes, he admitted the truth. Ukraine is a de facto proxy member of NATO and has been since 2014. We've been saying it on this show. People said, don't call it a proxy. It's not a proxy. They're fighting for their lives, their democracy. That is total garbage. Scholar John Mearsheimer just gave a speech on Ukraine and Russia, and he revealed some pretty remarkable items as well, namely that NATO began training the Ukrainian military in 2014, averaging 10,000 trained troops annually, he said, over the next 8 years. And now that the Ukrainian military has been destroyed, basically, we have 300,000 troops that are ready to pick up the slack against Russia. Don't worry about it, Ukraine. We've got you. This was all planned, guys. And he went on to say this in his speech. Mearsheimer said, quote, "My central claim is that the United States has pushed forward policies towards Ukraine that Putin and other Russian leaders see as an existential threat, a point they have made repeatedly for many years. Specifically, I'm talking about America's obsession with bringing Ukraine into NATO and making it a Western bulwark on Russia's border. The Biden administration was unwilling to eliminate that threat through diplomacy, and indeed, in 2021, recommitted the United States to bringing Ukraine into NATO." I love the word bulwark. It failed. They are not a bulwark. They failed. So now we're stepping in with 300,000 troops. And we should all be concerned at what the head of Britain's armed forces just said. He just mobilized his forces into readiness for World War III, echoing the moments right before World War II, saying, quote, "This is our 1937 moment. We're not at war, but we must act rapidly so that we aren't drawn into one through a failure to contain territorial expansion." Okay, so he went on to say that visceral nature of the European land war isn't just some manifestation of a distant storm clouds on the horizon. We can see it now, he said. So he's comparing where we are right now to the moments just before World War II, and we will not be caught flat-footed again, he said. He said we're going to call it Operation Mobilize. That's not an ambiguous name, by the way, Operation Mobilize. It's not like they named it Operation Sit Around and Watch Netflix. Mobilize. To do what? Well, he told us exactly what. Quote, "Putin must be contained, sealed off from their sources of influence, their funds, their technological capability. Putin must be contained." Putin seems like a guy that really likes to be told what to do by NATO. This is going to go well. I like how Michael Tracy put it on Twitter. British Army Chief declares he's mobilizing his forces to win a European war, in part to free up the U.S. to fight in the Pacific, basically sketching out the contours of the next World War. Everyone's just treating this as an inevitability rather than willfully chosen insanity. Great point, Michael. We've always said that the real story here, though, is China. So let NATO fight in Russia while the U.S. launches a war against China. Happy times are here again. We get to fight a two-pronged world war? Where did I hear this before? All of this comes as Foreign Policy magazine reported Friday that NATO is slowing down the speed of training Ukrainian forces. Now, why would that happen? Foreign Policy magazine says Ukraine's forces have received less training over the recent weeks, which impacts their capacity to operate some advanced weapon systems. And it goes on to say that NATO leaders aren't sure about sending these advanced weapon systems to these guys any longer. I have a better idea. Why not let us handle it? We've got 300,000 troops ready to go, highly trained forces ready to take over these advanced weapon systems. Just get the hell out of our way. All we need is your country, which we will use as a launching pad against Russia to launch World War III. Remember, Adam Schiff, Democrat, said it best.
The United States aids Ukraine and her people so that we can fight Russia over there and we don't have to fight Russia here.
So let us destroy your country as we launch World War III. Sound fair? We will level your entire country. We'll destroy your shopping centers. We'll destroy your apartment complexes. We will destroy everything. That's what we are good at. Side note, this article sits right next to this article on Foreign Policy's website. Is using nuclear weapons still taboo, it asks? No, we're all okay now with the idea of killing millions of people instantly. We're all over that. You know, that was a passing fad. That was just a fad when we were against nuclear war. Go ahead, use nuclear weapons. Can you believe these people? These are the same journalists cheering on massive NATO expansion. And the chorus of former generals and military cabal members are calling for the use of nukes against Russia. like Alexander Vindeman. In his opinion piece, he just wrote, "It's time to move past Washington's cautious approach and be prepared to use nuclear weapons." While these idiots toy around with nuclear weapons, the Western economy is in serious trouble. The sanctions that are supposed to bring Russia to its knees are backfiring spectacularly. The whole foreign policy of the United States and NATO allies is pushing us into a recession worse than 2008. And the worst part is that all of this is man-made, guys. They created the problem, and they won't admit they got it wrong while you suffer. They won't. They're not going to ever tell you the truth. Please subscribe to our channel as we continue to fight and shine a light on these corrupt politicians and the billionaire cabal that is ruining and running our lives. We'll see you next time.